What it is, what it was, what it shall be. We're back again. Today's video is called Spirit War Boot Camp number 118. This is entitled 5-Dimensional Hyperstition. How's everyone doing? So we're going to continue on from our previous set of videos, and we're going to reference various concepts that have been coming up, and we're going to continue on. So today, 5D hyperstition, what is that? 5-dimensional refers to something what I refer to as trans-temporal. This is the working theory that I have, is that time is a wave phenomenon and it's a fluidic phenomenon. There's such a thing as time density, time pressure, variable time flow, and all that, much consistent with the laws of like flow and viscosity and superfluidity in fluidics and hydrodynamics. But anyway, let's just say 5D is something trans-temporal. So we think of normally just 3 dimensions of space: up, down, front, back, left, and right. So that's our 3-dimensional set, which gives us a total of 6 vector coordinates around our physical person, right? A lot of people have speculated that the 4th dimension is time. This goes back to people like the Golden Dawn Society, this famous mathematician that created the jungle gym based on an attempt to teach kids about 3- and 4-dimensional geometry. Rudolf Steiner also wrote a book called The 4th Dimension. I'm trying to remember the name of this other mathematician, but it's escaping my mind. But let's just say a British Freemason and member of the Golden Dawn was a mathematician. I think he was the son of a mathematician as well, or something like that. But he was one of the first people to really start. He invented the concept of the tesseract, which was later used in famous books like Wrinkle in Time and so on like that. I think there's a lot of like Marvel Universe stuff with the Tesseract. It's really interesting. But anyway, the point is this guy coined the term the Tesseract, and we get the concept of the hypercube out of that. But it was his attempt to try and transition human awareness between our normal 3D consciousness and this 4-dimensional or time variable consciousness, right? So, and that's been developed by various people throughout the years. So to learn the history about that and to learn, the evolution of these types of concept, I would say, is very valuable to understanding. So in my concept, I have a little different variation of it. I see the 3 dimensions of space, then I see a type of continuum, which I call non-time, and that's what I refer to as the 4th dimension. So it's a place where all time exists simultaneously. It's kind of like the Nexus in Star Trek V, or the Bardo in Tibetan Buddhism, or the universal unconscious, if you want to think of it that way, right? So everything's there at all times. Everything from the past, present, and future coexists in the non-time space simultaneously. So if you were to develop a way that we call, projecting your consciousness into 4D, in essence, that's prophecy, that's like retrocognition, precognition, all at once. But in my opinion, just like doing graphics, right? If you're working with 3D or 4D graphics, you always need coordinates, and your coordinates gives you relative proportion, and it gives you orientation towards all other components of whatever it is. And same is true of time. Like, it's true that you can transplant your time anywhere, your consciousness anywhere throughout time. You can transplant it into non-time, right? But you're going to lack orienting type of matrix, or an orienting, paradigm to put you in place and to help you to coordinate and understand and orient yourself to this non-ordinary temporal awareness, right? And in my opinion, through my life experience, what I'm here to tell you is that this is not a new concept. People throughout time, shamanism is really deep. It goes into this same type of thing in many different ways, but also early, science of the ancient Greeks and so on, and the mystery school initiations, I'm going to argue. And there's a lot of chemistry involved with our time perception as well, and this is something that plant pharmacology is connected with as well. And what we would consider modern nutraceuticals can also, alter and get us into what's called a flow state. Some people refer to that, like, or getting in the zone. So that's a phenomenon where our time perception shifts, potentially allowing. And a lot of people talk about in traumatic situations like a car accident or whatever, time will slow down. So that gets into something a later physicist in the 20th century would refer to as time density. One of the most brilliant physicists and theorists in world history, in my opinion, was Kozyrev, and he wasn't alone. But he pretty much put this whole thing on the map in terms of the theory of time density and time flow. And just the same way, a lot of people take it for granted that gravity and time are connected, that the flow rate of time and gravity are connected. I don't necessarily adhere to that, but the point is they're both variable. Like, just as a lot of people never talk, they always want to talk about the gravitational constant, but they never want to talk about the fact that gravity is continuously variable across the surface of the Earth and even at different elevations. And much the same way that gravity is variable, time is also, the flow of time is also variable. And even under the bullshit theories of relativity, they acknowledge that there's probably a connection between time and gravity, or at least the perception of time, the you know, subjective perception of the flow rate of time, right? And so an easy way to connect that, people know if anyone's ever been under heavy anesthesia, or if you just had a really deep sleep where you just wake up and it's as if no time has passed, right? You have no subjective perception of time. So that shows us that the subjective perception of time flow and the external objective are considered intersubjective time flow perception. Those things can detach from each other, right? And a lot of people have had a variety of experiences where you just have a dream, and we know biologically that dreams happen in a matter of sometimes less than 1 second even, but it can seem like a lifetime of experience was encoded into that. So all these are just like everyday descriptions and trying to get people to think about these concepts of time density, time flow variability, and so on. Now let's get back to 5D. So to get to there, we had to understand 4D, non-time. So the immediate transcendence of our ordinary temporal awareness can put us into what I'm calling 4D, which is non-time. So what's 5D? Well, that's what I call trans-temporality. So that's what a lot of people would think of as time travel. So if you think of time as like a linear flow from past to future, you know, 5D is to go out of time in one place and come down somewhere else, or to reverse the flow rate of time. So to quote unquote travel back in time, or to travel forwards in time. These are all 5D phenomena. Trans-temporality, right? So as opposed to 4D, which is like a detachment or a separation from the time flow, 5D is where you're actually accelerating, decelerating, reversing the time flow, okay? So now hyperstition, that's our second concept. What is hyperstition? Well, the concept of superstition is a belief in certain ritualistic, kind of like OCD type of behaviors where, you know, you believe that if you take out a certain series of events, right, if you have your grimoire and you go through your grammar, which is a list or a series of what you would call algorithmic steps to achieve some certain type of result, right, that's a type of work that people have been doing for thousands of years, right? So they have an orderly perception and they have an artificial ordering of events in order to create some certain type of outcome, right? So you could think of time perception in a similar way. Like we create a time perception to quote unquote make sense of different connected events in our mind, right? But that's not objective, it's not absolute, it's a subjective phenomena. So now superstition, going from where you're trying to form loose correlations or associations between certain repetitive behaviors or iterative behaviors where you repeat something, like marching around the walls of Jericho 7 times or whatever. This is rife throughout all scripture, and actually throughout the history of magic too. This type of behavior is often closely connected with what we would call magic, and so superstition is closely related to that. So what's hyperstition? So that's where, rather than repeating or imitating or emulating or putting some variant on something that you heard externally before, hyperstition is the ability to create a completely novel mythological or pseudo-historical format. So a lot of people in warfare and in psyops and stuff would refer to this as narrative control, but it's narrative fabrication, right? In other words, so you're sculpting the narrative in order to change mass perceptions of events, whether it be past histories or future prophecies, or even current tense, like, you know, analysis of political realities to explain it in some certain way, like a narrative. You make a story out of it. So this is closely connected to hyperstition. So hyperstition is making a story with the intent of transforming mass perception, mass behavior, and eventually, if it's successful to whatever degree, then that actually shifts reality in a desired direction at the will of the magician. So hyperstition, I believe, was coined by someone in the CCRU. I don't know whether it was Mencius Moldbug or whoever, one of these fucktards, Nick Land, you know. I don't think they really created that. They just gave a specific term to it that happens to be useful, which is hyperstition. So, for example, like when I was a kid, we were constantly being propagandized with what I call patriot mythology or whatever, like a fanciful view, like George Washington and the Cherry Tree story, or whatever stories about World War II, or whatever it is, the Revolutionary War. That, of course, with any level of, non-superficial study, any kind of digging deeper and comparing varying accounts of things, you quickly learn that these fairy tales and stories are not accurate, and they're not really all embracing, right? They're kind of just simplified and dumbed down, if you will. And that applies to everything in our society and our culture right now. It's a form of hyperstition. It's a narrative, propaganda, right? Think of it as a complex form of propaganda that extends into things like a full historical or mythological narrative. Like, let's say you take the Iliad and you assume that there was some event that bears some kind of resemblance to the Trojan War, then you would look at the Iliad, which is obviously fabricated. It's obviously not 100% factual. It's mythological. It's a dramatic narrative, right? So already we're diverging from reality into something. And the thing is, at the will of the author of that, if it succeeds as a mimetic warfare, if it succeeds as like a 5D hyperstition, right? Then people adopt that view, they take that as real history, and then they engage in behavior based on that belief, and that paradigm, and then that in turn changes the external reality, right? Good, easy example of hyperstition refers to the Dune book and movie series. If anyone's watched even the modern Dune adaptation that just came out, they talk about how the Bene Gesserits, I wonder who that is. Anyway, the Bene Gesserit witches, right? They traveled throughout the galaxy, and whenever they go to a world, they like plant, or they adopt the mythology of the tribes or whatever, of the existing population. They adopt their mythology and they modify it, right? Just like the Catholic Church does with all the different saints and magical beings around the world. Like, they create a co-opted story of that and always make it subservient to their monotheistic spirit fascism, right? Where there can be only one. So Highlander mentality, right? So like, they do that over and over again, and they work with the existing narrative. They modify it to create a hyperstition, predictive programming for the future that they want. Like, say you're a Bene Gesserit and oh yeah, Muad'Dib's got to come and like mine all the spice real quick and steal everything from everyone and put the whole planet into slavery with this mythology that makes them think they're heroic for fucking mining spice and shit. And I was like, that's so genius. And it's crazy that that's a novel idea, even though all kids when I was growing up were taught about the Crusades and everything like that, and all these different holy wars and whatnot, or even the US Civil War or whatever. There's this fictional story that all revolves around some religious mumbo jumbo that never existed. And in my life, in history, in the Western world, it's all race-based. It's all race-based genocide, thievery, slavery, colonization, where they're putting something in people's colon, right? So it's like, this is the same story over and over again. Hyperstition controls the world. That's why military strategists and cyber strategists all study hyperstition and this concept, and they engage in it constantly. And there's this strange loop between fiction and reality that occurs. Like, and often they try to blur the line as much as possible. Modern examples that I would describe is like the Cthulhu mythos. And there's a crazy whole story around that, like H.P. Lovecraft and all the different people that more or less tried to monopolize his legacy, take control of publishing all his works, because there's a lot of stuff in there they really didn't want people to know about. And actually, the work of H.P. Lovecraft is a direct example of what I'm referring to as 5D hyperstition. So something a lot of people don't know is Lovecraft's father was part of something called the Ionic Lodge. Now, I don't know if an Ionic in Greek means wandering, and I think it pertains to like this different region of the Greek Isles or whatever, the Mediterranean, these different islands. Iona, right? There's an Iona in the Hebrides off the coast of Scotland, for instance, but there's also an Iona in Greece. They always even have a dialect called Ionian dialect. I think there's a mode in music that's called the Ionian mode, for instance. So, but this is, in my opinion, the Ionic Lodge. What it's really referencing is this concept of the aeon, A-E-O-N, right? Which means a long, massive time cycle. But in Greek, actually, this term is referring to what I was talking about earlier, more like non-time. So when we hear the word eternal life in these scriptures, really the phrase at hand is called aeonic, right? So it means outside the circles of time. And so if you look at the works of H.P. Lovecraft, he's creating to you a hyperstitious, maybe not intentionally, like I don't think he was intentionally trying to necessarily alter reality, but let's say, for instance, you exist in something called the Aeonic Lodge, or the Ionic Lodge, which is a form of masonry, which initiates you into this concept of non-time and gives you this temple, which is like a controlled, sacralized space where the normal rules of reality are kind of fucked with a little bit in various ways. I'm not going to go too much into detail, but let's just say if you did have something like this, a mystery cult where they think of this thing called non-time or aeonic reality, they use it for prophecy, they use it to learn about the past and get secrets of the past and secrets of the dead, right? They engage in necromancy, no different than the modern Mormons, like baptizing dead people and stuff like that. It's highly, highly connected. So what they're doing is they're trying to create a closed time-like curve, because this is actually the fabric of reality. Is like, take for instance a human life, for example. You know, you have a sperm cell, it grows and develops into an adult human being. Potentially that person procreates and they pass on their genetic code. And the thing just like that code repeats and repeats and repeats on and on. Right? And so that's an example of a time loop. And so you can chain a bunch of time loops together. That's what genetics is, right? That's inheritance, is a chain of individual lifespans, which is a time loop. But what most people don't talk about or think about or engage with is the concept that information can be transferred backwards and forwards in time in a non-linear fashion through this time loop. And so then you have other writers like Philip K. Dick moving a little forward in the future, and he comes out with this whole concept of aeonic or orthogonal time. So that's like, it's at a 90-degree angle to the normal flow of time. And I'm convinced that he personally did access something akin to that. He's not making that up, or he's not just imitating something that he read. I think his life experiences to me seem very compelling, and he engaged with what I'm calling the fourth dimension of non-time. And he got very prophetic visions of sci-fi future that, see, okay, so you could argue that Philip K. Dick is an example of hyperstition, because he created fictional works that would later go on to influence people, and they would even name their stuff after his stories or whatever like that. And to have something that just came out of his own mind go in and, you know, enter into the material world, be manifested into the material world. Luckily, he didn't really live to see most of that. But he also talked about instances where he would write a fictional story, and then later in life, random events would happen to fulfill the plot that he created. So now you're getting into 5D hyperstition. Now you're starting to understand it. But like, let's level up with that and take it a level higher. Say, for instance, that H.P. Lovecraft wrote a book, and he in turn was a member of a family that was involved in these lineage. So maybe this concept of Alhazred and stuff like that is actually based on Lovecraft's own family. It's known that Lovecraft was a columnist doing astrological forecasting, right? And this is something that if so-called Ionic Lodge or Aeonic Lodge did exist, that'd be something they're very interested in, because that's the really only method of reliable time measurement and reckoning of long cycles of time, would be astrology and astronomy. And that's what it's been used for constantly by all the emperors of the ancient world and so on up till the modern day. So we know he's involved with that. We know he's interested in that. And what does he write about? He writes about these beings and these previous eras of human civilization, a pre-cataclysmic, pre-flood civilization. And interestingly, he also talks about these aquatic life forms and how they hybridize with human beings to create a whole city of these bizarre human aquatic hybrid beings, right? So he talks about that. He talks about this like super ancient old gods, Nyarlathotep, and what's the other stuff that he talks about, Cthulhu and stuff like that. So it's a race of these non-human intelligences, if you will, that pre-exist our current whole cataclysmic era of time, that they're buried in the ice under Antarctica and all different, like all that stuff comes from him. And like I said, I don't think he's making it up all the way. Like he knows secret shit that most people don't. And that's one reason why these works have become so popular, is I think there's people out there that know exactly what he was talking about and where his shit was coming from. You know what I mean? And they're probably part of that same lineage, and they're preserving that. And there was a big battle with what's August Derleth and all these people trying to seize control over his literary estate and change the way that these myths and stories were told, delete and edit and redact various shit in those writings. And from what I've heard, at least anecdotally from people close to the matter, is that, let's just say there's a crossover between military intelligence networks and what we're calling gaming, like war gaming and all these role-playing games, and creating these simulations and games for military strategic purposes, but also because this act in itself is a form of magic. Like anyone who's seen Stranger Things, or who was alive like I was during the D&D satanic panic of the 70s and 80s, like, and know about people like Gary Gygax and all these, like, the dominant form of media in the world right now is video games. And everyone who's into video games, especially in the early days, all knew about what I'm telling you about Lovecraft, and because they all use that for their stories. Like 50% of everything in all the gaming is based on Lord of the Rings. Another 50% is based on H.P. Lovecraft. It's that crazy. I mean, I'm obviously exaggerating, but it's not far off the mark. And so there's people that know, or at least let's just say they believe in the magical power of this, the power to use this technology to shape and structure the world, right? And so this is why you have Crowley knowing about H.P. Lovecraft. You have one of his immediate successors, Kenneth Grant, going into this whole, and what does he call his series? The circle, beyond the circles of time and stuff like that. So he's getting exactly back into the same thing, and he creates this whole Typhonian OTO mythos about these beings from another time or from outside of time. And this really isn't that much different than the whole Masonic obsession with the fallen angels on the 33rd parallel of Mount Hermon and stuff like that. It's not that different. Or King Solomon using demons to build Solomon's temple. Like, why is there really religions on the earth to this day that still believe that somewhere in a mythical holy land of the past, that this guy who wrangled a bunch of demons and slept with foreign wives and murdered people that steal their wives, and like got seduced by his hundreds of wives into worshiping and having a shrines to Molech, the child sacrifice god, and the Astarte, Baal Astarte, and all these different things. It says right in the Bible that's what he did. But yet somehow this guy's the hero. This demon-wielding black magician who built a temple that never existed and created all these fraternities now that are running the world through blackmail, mind control, sex trafficking, so on. Like, how is this guy the good guy? And see, this is exactly what I'm telling you. This is the power of hyperstition. The Bible is obviously a work of hyperstition, and it's based on older works of hyperstition from ancient Babylon and from the Sibylline oracles. In fact, most people don't know, before anyone was ever called the Christians, they were called the Sibyllists. So what's Sibyl? That's a priestess, often a prepubescent priestess that's drugged up to give future predictions. And this shit is taken so seriously that all the emperors of the ancient world have a whole priestcraft of these people using psychedelics to predict the future. Okay. And how would you do that theoretically? Well, you'd get in touch with the fourth dimension and you try to gain access, and you would communicate with entities of various descriptions, many of whom tend to be draconine dragons and serpents all around the world. The pythoness of the Delphic oracle of Apollo, right? They call her a pythoness for a reason. It's not a coincidence. Okay, so this is hyperstition, the power of a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is what runs our world to this day. Some people know it, but a lot of people are confused about it. They haven't done the deeper research. They haven't really connected all these dots that I'm showing you right now. But let's try to come back to the clear plot line. So you have people like Lovecraft, then you have Crowley and his disciples like Kenneth Grant picking that up. Of course, we know Michael Aquino and his Temple of Set also were interested in this thing too, and they have their own variants on that as well. And so just now in 2026, we know there's tons of games, movies, comic books, videos, role-playing games, all based on this Cthulhu mythos. Well, what is that? Well, that's where people are participating with this hyperstitious fiction, right? And bring it into reality with their own imagination, like creating some kind of role-playing, dungeon adventure where they're like fighting Cthulhu or doing rituals to Cthulhu and so on. There's even a South Park episode all about it, right? So this now become a self-licking ice cream cone, which this myth and this hyperstitious narrative is so powerful that it continues to feed and draw energy off people, right? You could think of it as colonizing the minds of all the artists and creative people that are out there adapting this narrative and using that to create real change in the world. There's tons of Cthulhu dolls. You can go buy Cthulhu stickers, Cthulhu dolls, 1 million pieces of this H.P. Lovecraft propaganda, media merch, right? So this is hyperstition. And so to make it a little hit more close to home and get people to really believe, right, that powerful people are using that. Just think about Christian Zionism or whatever, Wahhabism or whatever, all these fake religious movements that are created by intelligence agencies to start wars, to control the world and exploit it for resources. So this is not really different from science fiction. It's all hyperstition, and human psyche is vulnerable or like receptive to certain different types of stories. And an intelligent person like your Joseph Campbell or Tolkien or Michael Aquino or whoever it is, they're smart enough to know these deeper archetypal layers to these myths, and they also are obsessed with reading all this ancient mythology, so they know about it. They have the whole vocabulary of it, so they can keep ginning up and recreating repetitions of this cycle in ways that's familiar and compelling to humans, and they know how to create these contagious mimetics, and they know how to use hyperstition to control the world. So I always try to do the flip side in all my videos. So everything that's being used against you right now, you can also use it. Create a myth of yourself, create a mythic narrative where you become the highest peak performing version of yourself, and you think about who's your allies in this mission, who's your enemies, what are the resources that you have available, how can you come up with tactics, techniques, and protocols based on the adaptation and maximization of all available resources. Create a myth and a story of how you develop. What's step one of your process? What's the first thing that you need to overcome? You know, as the hero's quest, like what's your first step on the journey, second step, third step, all the way down. What's the aim and what's the goal? What's the highest pinnacle you could possibly reach? Self-mythologize, create a hyperstitious narrative where you visualize everything ideal to fulfilling your wishes. Paint paintings, draw drawings, make little figurines, create sigils, make a video on YouTube, make an animated short film, whatever it is. Share your story with people, make it compelling. Write a rock and roll song, write an R&B song, write a fucking hip-hop song, write a fucking techno EDM song, make a film, like on and on. You're bringing, this is the nature of human beings, and this is our most proper engagement in human life. This is how we can fulfill our true purpose and fulfill our maximum potential, is to create a five-dimensional hyperstitional interaction with the reality around us. This is our playground. This is a simulation. That's not a bad thing or a scary thing, unless you feel bad about yourself and you're scared of yourself and your own potential. Otherwise, this is the most beautiful fulfillment of our potential. It allows us to realize our potential by engaging in this type of, you know, basically little drama of life, and this little battle or this little competition or this little strife and stress that makes us bring out our true strength. So that's the positive side of it, right? And the most powerful thing, like I always say, is cooperation. So getting a common vision that you can share with people, having a common objective, like to create a worldwide pastoral utopia of agrarianism where we live off the bounty of nature, where there's no weapons, bombs, and guns, and nothing bad or violent or corrupt can even come into our high vibrational space, because we have a veil of protection and all the gods of nature and all the powers of the universe are all on our side, because we're not fighting them. We're on their side and they're on our side. So instead of trying to destroy, exploit, bomb, laser beam, mind control nature into our wishes, what if we just cooperate with its game and we see that it's already flourishing and thriving and constantly producing novelty and abundance in every possible direction, in every climate, and every ecosphere on the earth. There's abundant, thriving life under the frozen fucking ice or in a volcanic lava plume under the water. There's tiny microscopic, nanoscopic life forms in that all the time, creating a negentropic interplay with that, creating order out of chaos, creating structure, creating evolution and development. That's the natural way of life. We've been hyperstitioned into the entropic hell pit of the fucking flushing black hole drain of entropy and heat death for the whole universe, the chaos and disorder and dystopia. All that's hyperstition. Like, we don't have to opt into that storyline. We don't have to take a part in that script. We could rewrite the script. We could steal the script and repurpose it to our own purpose and fulfillment, and engage instead in the antithesis of this entropic worldview. We can engage in a synergistic worldview of collaboration, cooperation, where this whole becomes more than the sum of its parts. Why don't we just opt into that reality? You know, become a powerful fucking reality wielding Jedi that shapes the reality around you. Right? That's not delusional. wherever we're at, we can go a level higher than we are at right now. And we can do and accomplish things that to our past self would have seemed impossible or ludicrous by discipline, by focusing the mind, using exactly what the Buddha Dharma has been teaching for thousands of fucking years. Teach the mind, sculpt the mind, flex the mind, keep the mind focused on your goals. Don't get distracted. Don't get deluded by illusions and delusions. Don't get wrapped into pleasure and pain spirals of fucking delusional bullshit. Recognize the temporary nature of all material phenomena, and further recognize that we partake of something completely extraneous to the world of cause and effect and materiality. We're above that. That's our playground. It's not something where we get put in jail and soul prison and hell. That's a hell trip that we opt into, but you don't have to. Think about what other possibilities are out there. Become a wielder of hyperstition instead of a victim of it. Use your hyperstition to improve all the circumstances around you by creating a beautiful synergistic narrative of bliss and of total utopian reality where we have incredible abundance, where human beings are naturally, by the very nature of their being, interconnected with an infinite field of Akashic memory that goes beyond time, throughout the deepest depths of the past to into the most far-flung future, through every possible variation in between. We're at one with that. We are part and parcel of the same substance that's creating all of that. And so why get roped into a low resolution, shitty fucking AI bot story of reality? Everyone's doing that right now. There's probably over 1 billion or maybe even 2 billion people in the world right now that are getting roped in by AI slop bullshit, low grade, low resolution, low intellect, low IQ, low emotional intelligence, low spiritual intelligence. They're just roped down into the fucking lowest common denominator, watching porn and cat videos and Temu product placement for fucking toxic cosmetics to rub on themselves and give themselves cancer and disrupt their own hormones and become a gender neutral fucking sex bot for the fucking Epstein class. Like, people are doing that. They're opting into that because they've become the victim of hyperstition. The fiction and the narratives and the data holograms have all been embedded in them from external against their own benefit. So you don't have to be part of that. Become a 5-dimensional hyperstitional operative that's creating a mimetic reality of total bliss, total participatory cooperation, total synergetic harmonization of surpassing the whole through the sum of the parts being expanded into an infinite degree. We can all engage in this. We can all be part of this. This has been Spirit War Boot Camp number 118, 5D Hyperstition. More to come. We'll see you next time, and we'll go even deeper. Hope you enjoy.